Music is such a huge part of life. Everyone has a band or a genre or a sound, a feeling that is their preferred type of music that just brings them to a different place. And music has obviously changed and evolved a lot just in my lifetime. It's so much different. But just like everyone else, my music journey started when I was a child, when I was little. One of my first memories of life in general is hearing John Lennon's Double Fantasy album, which came out in 1980. And you gravitate towards music that you hear, music that your parents play. But then something happens as you start to get a little older. You discover your own preferences. You hear music that starts to speak to you. And so that's what I want to do here for this Back in the Day segment, is to talk about my first foray into my own personal preference of music. And it's good for some laughs. It starts off with a present I got probably for my 5th birthday, which was a Fisher-Price Phonograph player. That's something they had back in the early 1980s, was a child's record player. That's something that is, you probably could find it on eBay now. When doing research for this podcast, I looked up Fisher-Price record player, and I found Fisher-Price Phonograph, which is what it was. The one that I believe I had was first released in 1978. And if you look it up, it's kind of beige top with a mustard yellow spot where you'd put the record, the mustard yellow arm with the needle that you'd play the album. The first record that I got that I remember playing on this Fisher-Price Phonograph was Michael Jackson's Thriller. And to this day, the very first song on the album, Wanna Be Startin' Something, gives this sort of memory that just pops into my head every time. And that is, back in the spring of 1983, once it got warm, we would put the Fisher-Price Phonograph in the front window at my house, open the window, and start to play that album. And all the kids that lived in the surrounding houses would come over and dance in the front yard. So it's like something out of a musical, where there's a bunch of 7, 8, 9-year-old kids dancing in the front yard to Michael Jackson. But that was a real thing, and it happened a lot. But Michael Jackson and Michael Jackson's Thriller, I mean, it's one of the biggest albums ever made. So it would be natural that I would like that music and have that, and it would be natural that I was exposed to it, because my parents were young. Well, young for having a child, so their taste in music was kind of similar to others that were in their early 20s at the time. But a funny thing happened was my direction that I went into as far as what I liked for music kind of went way off the path from Michael Jackson. And I can honestly say, I was 6, 7, going on 8 years old, in that range. I don't know where this taste in music came from. I don't know if I heard songs. I don't know if my parents influenced it. I honestly can't remember. But I remember the albums that I had. Now, when I say I had, granted, I probably asked for them, but my parents bought them. It wasn't like I went out and bought these as a 7-year-old. The very first album that I can think off the top of my head that I had, that I played a lot on my Fisher-Price Phonograph, was Van Halen's 1984. The picture of the baby, but he's supposed to be an angel, and he's got a pack of cigarettes on the front. 1984 probably was Van Halen's biggest album they ever did. It was their last real one with David Lee Roth, and it had Jump, Panama, it had Hot for Teacher. Those were huge songs, all over MTV when they played actual music and weren't reality shows. So that one's not too far out in right field. A year or two later, I had Motley Crue's Theater of Pain. That came out in the spring of 1985, I think. That had Home Sweet Home and Smokin' in the Boys' Room. And the cover is those theater masks, one smiling, one crying. And Motley Crue, they're, glam rock they were at the beginning. But that's another one. It's not too far off the beaten path. Van Halen, Motley Crue. But still, think of it. Here I am. I'm 7, 8 years old, and this is what I've got. But hold on, it gets even better. Does anyone out there remember Twisted Sister with Dee Snider, who looked like a football player with big frizzy blonde hair and makeup? They were in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Anyone remember Pee-wee's Big Adventure when he's riding through the Hollywood backlot and Twisted Sister was doing a video? Well, you got to go look it up. I had the Stay Hungry album, which came out in the spring of 1984 and has Dee Snider on the front looking as psychotic and terrifying as you think he would to a 7-year-old child. looks like he's eating a big drumstick. That album was their biggest album. It had Burn in Hell, it had I Wanna Rock, and We're Not Gonna Take It. So that was blasting on my Fisher-Price phonograph too. It's crazy. I don't know where I heard Twisted Sister. Maybe it was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and I saw them and said I wanted their album. But wait, it gets better. Anyone remember Rat? Rat was another heavy metal, early to mid-'80s band. I had the album Out of the Cellar, which had Round and Round, which was pretty much their only hit. That was one. I still love that song. I've got that on, well, I guess iPod, but it's my phone. I think Rat actually just kind of had a mini resurgence last year when they did that Geico commercial, when the couple said they had a rat problem, and downstairs there's the band playing, but they're all like in their 60s now, so it's not quite as cutting edge as it was in 1984. But the coup de grace was Quiet Riot's Mental Health album. Oh my God. So Quiet Riot, that album came out around the spring of 1983, and it had, Mental Health was a big song, but Come On Feel the Noise was one I still listen to that song. That was basically as big as they got, was that album. But the thing I remember about it was the cover. There's a man on the cover basically in a straitjacket with this silver metal mask, and he's got these huge eyes and this spiky hair. And I'll never forget, as a 6-year-old child, I had this album, and I loved the music, but I hated the cover, and I was terrified of it. So I would have to have the cover face down when I played the music. It's crazy. I don't know where I heard Quiet Riot, but here it is. I don't know if I asked my mother, can I have this album? And it's like, really? Like, you look at the cover and that's what you want to listen to? But I was a little metalhead. Quiet Riot, Twisted Sister, Rat, Motley Crue, and I loved all of it. I still love that type of music. Granted, my circle of music, I listen to pretty much everything. But just imagine that. This little kid growing up on Cape Cod, Fisher-Price Phonograph, and he's got Rat, Twisted Sister, Motley Crue, Quiet Riot. All right. But just so you don't think that I was just focused on glam rock and heavy metal, I did have Huey Lewis and the News, Sports. That was a great album still, even back then. And it's funny, I don't know when this album came out, but one that I would play every now and then, I think my mother had this album, was by a man named Dan Hartman in probably the spring of '84. He had a song, I Can Dream About You. And I remember that song getting played a lot on my Fisher-Price phonograph. I don't know if my mother had his actual album or the Streets of Fire soundtrack, which the song was on the movie soundtrack, but I heard that song a lot. I played it a lot, and that's kind of one of those things where I don't know. Don't judge too much. 1980s music is something that it's aged well, but it's aged not well, if that makes sense. There's some stuff that just is amazing to this day. There's other stuff that you just shake your head like, I can't believe that was reality. But that's, way, way back in the day, my kind of first foray into what I liked as music. What did you like when you first started listening to music? I'm talking when you were little. What's your first memories of music? And what did you have for the way to play it? I'm old enough that I had vinyl and I had a phonograph. I'm not that old. But others, they had the Discman, they had the boom boxes. Some people that are listening to this might be so young that you just had the MP3 player as a kid. And for any of you out there that are my age, a little older, 40s to early 50s, if you're looking for a Fisher-Price phonograph for your own collection for some retro, I've seen them on eBay. They're as low as $30, but those are probably really low quality. They're usually $80 to $100 at least. So I won't be getting one for myself. But that's way back in the day, my first foray into music. Tell me what you think. Shoot me an email. Message me on Twitter, Instagram. And I'll be back for another Back in the Day in the next episode.